Grab your coffee and join me, Nicoa, for a caffeinated conversation about life. I'll be talking to people who have chosen to walk their own paths and, just like me, are creating a life by design. I hope it will give you the inspiration you need to do exactly the same. Hey everybody, I'm here with Mark Beagan. I've been singing that all day today, Mark. Isn't that funny?
Oh, I love it. I need you to hang out with me more often.
I need to follow you around. Kind of like that Starbucks commercial that they used to have where you go get your coffee and then they played, oh my God, y'all are going to yell at me for not remembering who sings this song, but like you get your coffee and they go, Nicoa, 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 Nicoa. And I used to think that when I'm walking out, I'm like, yeah, man, this Starbucks is going to fuel me for the rest of the day.
Love it. Yeah.
You got your coffee?
I got it. I've got my favorite mug here, so we're all good. Vancouver is the city for the day, and yeah. Yeah,
you got your Vancouver Starbucks mug. I didn't even bring my Starbucks mug out, but that's okay. Everybody, this is actually a coffee with a friend catch-up. I mean, you and I met back in 2004.
Around then? Yeah.
Right. 6, 5, I don't even know. And
Around
you're in Canada. Are you still in Canada? Are you in
I'm still in Canada, yeah. Yeah. Up around the Toronto area, if anyone knows, so.
Okay, well, depending on the election results, I might be moving in. I'm just kidding.
Come on up.
I know you guys you're welcoming us. I know. Everybody, my friend Mark Beagan and I actually met during time at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And was it Thermo Fisher yet, or was it still Thermo Electron?
While I was there, it was Thermo Fisher, and then the integration occurred, yeah.
And then it occurred, that's right. And we had a recent reconnection. Now, we've always been connected over the years. You know, you were on my human resources team, and I had gone up to visit with you, and you reached out the other day and said you wanted to share a little story on LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, God. I'm like, what story are you getting ready to tell? And yes. And before I even let you tell, I want you to start off with telling that story, just because I'm so proud of it. And I'm so honored that you would be even willing to revisit it and that it had such a big impact. But ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to Coffee with Nicoa. My friend Mark Beagan, he's actually a 20 plus seasoned career human resources executive. He not only has a foundational degree in psychology, he's a certified change practitioner, certified coach like me. And he also does these amazing posts on on LinkedIn, Coffee with Mark. Really, I know you don't call him that, but it's inspirational leader stories. You guys need to follow him. He now has his own company. About a year and a half ago, he went out on his own, Bima Coaching and Consulting. He's also a father. He has 2 amazing kids. Is that right? 2 kids, a son and a daughter. Yeah.
2 that I know of.
2 that he knows of that we're gonna make claim to. He is an avid outdoorsman. He loves skiing and camping. Just came back from a vacation. It looked like maybe you were doing some mountain biking, some sup work out there on the lake. And you're a big music lover. I've been stalking you appropriately. And then you made a post the other day that I wanted to ask about. You were like the 1,778th reason why I love Japan. Are you a big Japanophile or whatever?
I lived in Japan before I met you. So that was really deeply, formative in my life. And, growing up in a small town and then going to Japan was like this just a journey of finding myself. And ironically, I found myself, at least a part of myself, in Tokyo. So there we go. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. How long did you live there?
Just over a year, back in, after the degree kind of thing. And
I'm so glad you did that. My son speaks Japanese and has been to Japan 3 times. He just turned 27. He's been going since he was, I guess he went when he was 18. He worked there. He loves Japan, and we have a plan for a 2026 trip to Japan, just the 2 of us. So nice. I have to talk to you before I go.
That's a beautiful place. And it's
beautiful place.
Right, yeah.
You have such a big life by design, a beautiful life, and you have a beautiful mantra, too, of peace, love, and acceptance. I wore my love shirt today for those that cannot see me. I'm very pleased to have you as a guest. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you're doing today and then share that story?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And, how we see the world is so unique. So when we met, I was not living a life by design, and it was kind of a tough period for me. I'll speak for myself. And I worked for you, and I remember, forgive me, my perception was always, you're the big corporate person. I remember one time, you were always really polished and a little reserved, and not the Nicoa we see and love and all that stuff. And it was interesting because I remember in particular one time I called you and I thought you were in Frankfurt because you were in Frankfurt, and then you were in Kuala Lumpur actually. And so I went from thinking I was talking to you at 2 p.m, and it was about 9 or 10 at night or something like that. I'll never forget that. I just went, yeah, I never knew where you were going to answer your phone from.
Oh my God, I never knew where I was going to answer my phone. And, I was a little uptight back then, but it kind of came with the territory.
It did. You were responsible for, as I recall, about 14,000 people. So yeah, no, I would be the same. And I was supporting, so Thermo Fisher had a core business that they were very good at. And the majority of their business units were really successful. The one that I supported was not. And it just, And my understanding was that the R&D budget was cut, and it was a technology business. And so this business went from being, market leader to kind of dull average to really struggling.
Yeah.
And so when I joined there, it was not a fun place. And up to that point in my career, I'd worked on turnarounds, restructurings, reorgs, mergers, acquisitions, and so forth. And I kind of came in with this here's another problem we're going to solve together as a leadership team. And we just basically timed out. Unfortunately, I think that business just struggled, and it was not fun. And I'll never forget. You could see me. You could see I wasn't having fun. And I remember you reminded me one day, you took me aside virtually and just said, Mark, go out this weekend and just have some fun, because it looks like you're just not having fun at work. And it was that case. And it was, for me, it was really enlightening, because it was the first time I'd ever, and first, juxtapose corporate Nicoa, and then now you're telling me to go out and have fun. And so there was a few things there. It was the delivery from a very corporate polished executive. And then secondly, it was the first time I had heard the word fun in the workplace. So it was,
oh my gosh. Well,
it was great.
Well, I don't remember the conversation, but I'm really proud of myself for reminding you that life's too short to be, completely freaking out all the time. And that, it's kind of a game that we play in the corporate world. And what I love about our conversations over the last few weeks, and I anticipate in this conversation, is really not just about a life by design, but about leading by design. And I was a different person back then. That was such a long time ago. And I don't even look like the woman that I looked like then. Like, I look completely different. I feel like I look younger and healthier and happier. And not that I was unhappy, but I didn't know anything else. And I would be curious for you. I recall I went to visit you at your facility before. You remember I came up for a visit and I was there for a day or two. I remember it snowed and I was thinking, oh, I'm in Canada and it's snowing.
It happened.
And I had to get a visa so I could be there to work. I mean, it was like a pain in the ass, but I do remember making it there to see you, and among other people, I guess. But tell me what it felt like to be you then compared to what it feels like to be you now, and then we'll talk about that, how you got there, what the difference is.
Yeah, it was interesting. So yeah, it was, in life we have ups and downs, and realized back then that I was, of course, now I know I was actually in a down at the time. Professionally, I was supporting a business that wasn't performing. And personally, my wife at the time was going, and I were going through fertility treatment. And so that's not easy whatsoever. And so, 8-9 hours a day working on a business that was just fighting to turn itself around. And then coming home to just, the struggles that go with that. And so it's interesting. We have these natural cycles in our life of up and down. And, one of those things is that, when you're down, you sometimes don't even know you're in the trough, so to speak,
Describe how it felt inside of you. Like when I think back, I felt like my energy was like in my chest and up, and I was just constantly going and trying to keep everything, like all the checklists, all of the emails, all the to-dos, we had Blackberries back then, just functioning, just trying to almost just survive day after day after day. And you didn't know anything different. I felt kind of intense. I don't know. How would you describe the way you felt?
Yeah, I don't know if this is I'll say this. I did kind of the same thing. I just doubled down on my career, and I recognize now that's not the right way to go about things. But I kind of went and I said, okay, Mark's going to just super focus on this, even though we sell a product that needs about 4 years of R&D to get back to being, back to being state of the art. If we just focus, we can get there maybe faster, which was unrealistic. And I guess the key thing personally was it was very one-dimensional, right? And so later in the story, we'll talk about the multiple dimensions that came to life, right? And, instead of just focusing on, okay, if I just work harder, everything's going to turn out right, and, if I just work harder, maybe the fertility treatment will work.
Right, you were solving the problem, solve the problem. What was the cost of that to you physically, emotionally during that time?
That's it. Well, the relationship with my wife at that time really took a deep toll. I hear a lot of men are like this. Keep me honest here, but I had lost contact with all my friends. I was hollow inside, and good question. It was just hollow inside, I'll just say. And it just felt like I was holding on to this thought, and it's not accurate, but I'm just going to climb the corporate ladder. I'm going to be a vice president at a large global company, and all will be well. Yeah. That's what I was holding on to.
Yeah.
And you did it. So that road very well.
And the cost, when I think about it, was just a lack of holistic awareness of reality. I mean, of life and why we're on this planet. I just was so focused on that. In my case, the American dream checklist, right? Okay, well, I would work out and say, I'm going to be a vice president. It was obsession. And because I assumed if I did those things, then I would be worthy. And I couldn't even have used that language then. I just thought, well, that's how you win. That's what you're supposed to do. And that's going to create happiness. And I remember making it to the top and thinking, why am I still not completely satisfied and fulfilled? I don't understand.
And it's so interesting. Everything. Yeah. And it's so interesting. Because that's been your journey. That was my journey. And then I'm curious. I'll answer it for myself and then I'll throw it back to you as well. But when I meet with my clients, I had a very senior executive in the financial services industry who had climbed the ladder, got to where that person wanted to be, and every other dimension in that person's life needed work. Mm-hmm. And that's how I felt. I'll just say that. And so you get to this apex of what you think is going to be the solution to all your problems, and it's not. If anything, it just turns into bigger problems, you know?
It does. I mean, I'm not in that relationship that I was in for 25 years for a number of reasons, probably because we had not fostered our future together earlier in that dynamic of striving. We were thriving with the kids, I guess. I mean, they all have therapists. I don't know. So who knows? I mean, but I wish I could have, in reflection, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about and when, hindsight's 2020. But if we had known what we know now, I wish I had created a foundational connection with my partner, with each of the children in a deeper way, in a more, tender and authentic and loving. I mean, we love each other, of course, but I see you kind of way instead of okay, I see you. Great outfit. Great. Perfect party. Excellent. Everybody dressed up for Halloween. Okay, let's go. And I'm off to work again. Like, it was never fully present and grounded to where we could savor it. I don't know. I feel like I have that more now. What about you?
Yeah, it's interesting. The first company I worked for was an EAP company, so there were psychologists everywhere. Yeah,
Employee Assistance Program company, yep.
Yeah, and one of the psychologists there, Don, would always say, not necessarily to myself, but he would say it to, everyone. He said, there's real value slowing down to speed up, to your point. And I count myself lucky because when I had my kids, I think I had a little bit of awareness of the importance of slowing down and enjoying it. Of course, I could always have spent more time, but I was fortunate to work from home. And so that helped to really savor that dimension of my life and to slow down. But the price I paid was on the relationship with my spouse, right? And the way you characterized it was the same as myself. Okay, you pick up from thing, I'll pick up a pizza, you do this. And then, don't even think of going away for the weekend biking or mountain biking or go to New York for the weekend or anything like that, because we've got 12 things to do this weekend.
Right. It was always about me, but also not connecting with each other in a safe space. I mean, when you think about some of your journey and some of those ahas along the way, I don't really think it hit me until way after I quit my corporate job. And I quit the job, but then I like to say I created the same circus under a different tent. I was just in charge of it now, like with no benefits. I had not healed anything. I just recreated it. I'm curious. Now, you've only recently gone out, but you've changed companies. You've done different things. When did you start recognizing life might not be the path you thought it was supposed to be? Guess what, y'all? I published a book. Your Life by Design, a Coffee with Nicoa self-care coaching journal, is now available on Amazon. This interactive journal begins and ends with powerful queries, guiding you on a quest for the kind of life by design you don't need a vacation from. I've included an in-depth look at strategic self-care to empower you and hold you accountable to really getting to know your true self. It's time to prioritize you. Use the link in the show notes to buy yours today.
Well, it's interesting because out of the ashes of, and I try not to do this with my clients, but I'm going to be a little dramatic here. Out of the ashes of my failure, today I call it an experiment and we learn from it, right? Which is such a healthier way of thinking about things. But coming out of that, that professional failure and the challenge of trying to build a family, I took that and was able to then, we adopted 2 beautiful children. Incredible, And secondly, what I learned from, I'll be dramatic here, that failure then led into probably professionally my 2 most satisfying engagements. One very much focused on employee engagement, leadership, really being able to be strategic about how we can make a better workplace and better employee experience and so forth, which drives, of course, corporate performance, and then leading to landing at that VP job and then realizing I'm really qualified at this, not having imposter syndrome when I arrived, and yes, having that feeling like, yeah, I made it. Now what kind of thing.
Now what?
And, but it was out of the ashes of that failure that kind of led me to learn and move on. And then I came to this, because those hollow feelings of, okay, now I'm a vice president. People are calling me. We need you in New York tomorrow. Ego's like off the charts. Right. You know? And on the inside, I'm just like absolutely hollow inside. So I then took some time to think and reflect. And
tell me an example, like a moment where you recognize that feeling of hollowness. You know, I can recall a morning waking up in Frankfurt, to your point, and not remembering for up to almost an entire minute where I was. I did not know where I was. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to remember. I was so exhausted. We probably had just flown back from India or on our way back or something. And I remember thinking, I'm going to remember. And then I was like, I know my name. I don't have amnesia. I'm not kidding you. I had to think. The room was dark. I couldn't recognize anything. And then it was almost a full minute. And I remember thinking, okay, wait. I'm in Germany. Okay, I know where I am. And then looking in the mirror, getting ready that day and thinking, if I could just get through today, if I can get to dinner, and then the next, if I could just get through these meetings. And I remember thinking, what the fuck? That life should not be if you can just get through. That's my biggest memory.
Yeah, it's funny. Originally, when you said that, there was one time where I was in Washington and I just was like that. But actually, I had even a more pronounced moment. I had significant success with this particular Canadian business. And it was really complex because 4 businesses came together. So 4 cultures, 4 strategies, 4 leadership, all that stuff, right? And then I went on and did some really meaningful work across the Americas with the technology group. And I started feeling invincible. And then I got promoted to a job where my client, and I'll just use nice words, was incongruent with the values of the organization. The guy was just an asshole.
Yeah.
And like a real asshole. And I'll never forget it because And the reason why is because all I could think of is that I'm now at the 6-year mark here. I've got some big check marks beside my name. And now there's a big 1X. And the X is not attributed to me. It's attributed to this jerk. And all I could think of is how quickly things can change. And that's what happened with me. It was like superstar, rock star, whatever he does, whatever team he works with, things go well. And then things went really south really quick.
Did you get scared? What would be the emotion? I know you talk about, men need to talk about their emotions. We don't control them. We need to seek to understand them. At what point did you start having a conversation with yourself about your emotions?
Yeah, well, it was absolutely fear-laden. And it was interesting because, again, just to that piece, as much as I was starting to broaden my identity with a more holistic view of myself, I'd still built up that ego that, I'm a large, big vice president. I'm untouchable, right? Mm-hmm. I worked with a team to turn this around, and I worked with another team to turn that around, and we were successful. And there's no way they're going to do a reevaluation of everything. And of course they did. And I'll just say this, like that, the jerk was let go. The replacement was in Europe and said, I want an HR person
in Europe
on Central European time.
Yeah, that happens.
And like that, I'm then negotiating my exit. And so that was...
So you were afraid. You were scared.
Absolutely.
This was not what you expected. Holy crap. And yet, talk to me about those conversations with yourself. Was it abusive at first, or were you supportive, or did you ask for third-party help? Did you call the EAP? Tell us what you did.
Yeah, I didn't do enough. I should have done more because, forgive me, I was trying to look up the Jack Donaghy. I don't know if you ever watched 30 Rock,
Oh, yeah, 30 Rock's hilarious.
Put my emotions in the vault and just, we know that doesn't work, right? But
right.
I have to say, when we're under extreme stress, we then go back to our original game plan. And so my original game plan was just focus and do this, and we'll push through this. Mm-hmm. The reality was there were so many forces at play that I had to come to accept. And I was scared like you wouldn't believe. I was afraid. This construct of myself as a vice president was crumbling and eroding, and I was absolutely petrified. And the thing is it happened like that. I went from hero to close to zero almost overnight. And that was really my moment where I have to measure my life in a different way. I have to measure my life in a different way, not just this way, because, and I kind of understood it before then, but really that was the defining moment. If I can let an external organization have that much control over who I am, then that's on me. That's not on no one else.
That's exactly right. Taking responsibility for the dynamic. There is no promises to longevity, especially the higher up you get in these roles. I mean, what did they say? The turnover rate is it's like 95% at the top roles. I mean, none of it's guaranteed. And if you haven't fostered a foundation for who you are, then you will feel terrified. And I can remember feeling terrified too. Like, oh my God, what have I done? So how did you do that? Did you do it all by yourself, recognizing this, or did you get any help? I'm just curious.
I should have got help.
You are the help.
Yeah, I should have got help. Now I was lucky because globally I had a great boss in California, and at the same time there was no way of kind of turning this around. And so I think personally, I then really went back and I wanted to refocus, and this is where we'll pull a little bit of life by design in, is I have to redefine what my North Star is, and I have to redesign kind of the values in my life. And it's interesting because my background's psychology, and part of it's industrial psychology, part of it's, just regular psychology. And yet they both melt together, right? Organization may have a mission. I call my life by design a North Star. And I really went back and I just took some time to evaluate and a big piece was this, is I saw the video with Robert Waldinger, TED Talk, on human adult development at Harvard. And it was that whole piece on the study had started in the 1930s. Yeah. And they looked at those who thrived and who didn't. And they looked at two groups. They looked at a group. This was another key defining moment, right? One group was the third year class at Harvard. And the other was a group of folks that were from a not very privileged neighborhood. In fact, it was a pretty disprivileged neighborhood in Boston. And what they found out was the key determinant for a happy and healthy life really wasn't around being third year at Harvard, but it was more about having deep rooted, real friendships. And that doesn't mean your life is perfect, but a close core group of people around you that you can count on through most part for thick and thin. So that was kind of another key moment. And so then I put my North Star.
Well, let's stay there for a second, because friendship is pretty key. And we also have seen the research, I don't know who to quote or reference, but that if you have a best friend at work, that can be a determining factor for longer term retention. And so having a BFF, it's funny, I didn't actually have any BFFs until I was at Thermo. I still have, Susan Gagney. She's my best friend forever from my corporate environment. And so it's, for those of you listening, where are your friendships, and are you fostering them? Are you making the phone call? I have a guy I did some work with right after my last job, and every about 12 to 18 months, I pick up the phone and call him, just check in with him. And we did some work together, but he's a friend. So yeah, it sounds like that was critical for you. And it sounds like you had some good support from your boss too. So I'm glad.
Yeah. I'm happy to say he's still my friend. And, I'm even we talked, we're still friends. And so I kind of just wanted to, have friends and family. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to have deep personal relationships with my children. I wanted to cultivate friendships, and I use that word really importantly, meaning, everyone's busy. So I make a little bit for the people that I consider to be really close friends, I make an effort to be there for them. And as long as they reciprocate to a certain level, that's great. You know what I mean? But I think you have to cultivate your friendships because everyone's busy.
Yeah, these are your values. This is, you and I have done so much work integrating companies. At the end of the day, we rarely do that for ourselves and our families. So we know how to set up a culture. We say, here are our values. Here's the behaviors we're going to measure you against. And this is what success looks like. And this is what is acceptable. This is what is not acceptable. This is how we'll be rewarded. And this is how we'll celebrate. We do all that work for the corporation. And yet we come home and I remember trying to have this activity where I had each person in the family's name written on a piece of paper on the kitchen island. And I was like, let's write down what we're thankful for each other. And let's just, out of the 5 people in our family, myself included, 2.5 of one page of the third person, they just were snarky and joked because it was uncomfortable. They wrote silly things. They weren't comfortable being generous with saying why they loved each other, what they were grateful for. And that's an example of the miss. I'm like, wow, I couldn't foster that. I didn't foster that, but it's never too late. It is never too late. So talk to me about, you got that set of values. You've set forth your true north or your North Star. Mm-hmm. At what point did you start seeing an impact in your satisfaction and your happiness?
Well, it was interesting. I'm a little concrete. So I'm a little concrete in the way that I think. And so I created, and it was funny though, I made it because my frame of reference was corporate, I made quarterly goals,
Yes, I love it. I mean, why not use the tools you have?
Yeah. And it was so interesting because I had known the Gallup research, and then I read Robert Waldinger. I thought, geez, it only makes sense about the friendships. In my corporate life, I set goals about structure and strategy and leadership and so forth. Why don't I do this about fun? And why don't I do this about having deep personal connections with my family? Funny enough, when I started doing this, I put emotional kind of goals at the bottom because, I did it. And I find it now, it's now risen to almost the top. My family and friends, health, And then my emotional well-being is right up there because I found
that. What does that mean, emotional well-being? What does that mean?
Well, that's where I think my value statements kind of came through, meaning I value peace. So am I doing something that disrupts my peace? And there's days when I go out and I said, you know what? When I said that to that person, actually, I was in New York City 2 weeks ago on vacation with my kids. And I said something to someone, a stranger, and I walked back and I went, that wasn't peaceful. That wasn't nice, you know? And so I couldn't go back and say, hey, excuse me, I was a jerk, you know? But I sat there and
you got to tell us what happened. You got to tell us. Okay, tell us what happened.
It was actually in Washington. Yeah, okay. Please don't throw anything at me.
I won't.
Oh, it was actually in Washington. And this is I feel bad about this. We're in Washington, D.C., and there's the Congress building. And I don't know if you've ever been to Havana, Cuba, but the exact same architect did the same building in Havana.
Oh, cool.
And funny enough, I drove around Cuba because I'm Canadian. And I literally parked my little Volkswagen Jetta that we rented right in front of what would be the congressional building of Cuba, right?
Yeah.
But then I saw some tourists and I went, oh, yeah, that's just like, and I knew this. I said, this is just like the one in Havana, knowing that's a bit of a politically divisive statement, right? Yep. It was the same architect, all that stuff. But I kind of walked away and I could see on their face that they didn't like that comment. And I just kind of stepped back and I said, that's not peaceful. That's not loving. The environment in the U.S. is a little bit, I'll just say, when you talk about politics, you got to be a little careful. And I guess that's a big thing that I just checked in with myself and said, Mark, just,
Yeah.
Enjoy the ceremony.
Because I often ask the question, what would peace do in this situation? What would love do? What would calm do right now? What would happiness look like right now? What would joy look like? And if people can begin to ask themselves these questions, then they might be able to access it more easily. And if they can't, then there's another question, right? You and I as coaches know that this is kind of how you peel back the onion of that way of being that might be hollow, or at least not as fulfilled as we'd like it to be.
It was interesting. I just got to let you know, though, for all the Americans that are mobilizing energy right now and ready to storm the borders, I just want to let you know that by the time I got to Abraham Lincoln, and you've been to Washington, so you know. Mm-hmm. So by the time I got to, I think forgive me, I'm Canadian. Is that the Gettysburg Address up on the wall by Lincoln?
I think so.
And I walked up to a stranger and went, it's one of the most beautiful pieces of literature I've ever seen in my life. I'm a Canadian and I'm in awe. And I said, that's the mark that needs to show up,
Yeah. I mean, it's about embodiment and not just what we say and do, which is what you and I did for a very long time. Did we really embody, the fun and the friendship and the way of being that we hoped to leave behind as a legacy? And when you contacted me the other day, I was like, oh, wow. Oh, good. There was a part of me that was actually embodying that. I actually did embody my truth whenever I could. And mainly that occurred, Mark, in the one-on-ones. And I hope I was kind to you when you called me at 9 or 10 at night. I took the call. So
I was in shock because I'm pretty sure I don't think it was 9 o'clock at night. I think it was, like midnight or something.
Probably.
That's I suspect you were still on Eastern time or something like that. So,
well, clearly I didn't know where the hell I was or what time it was. Well, let's talk about now. So some of the work you do now, I mean, you really have shifted into a new way of being. How would you describe how it feels to be you now after that kind of evolving and that evolution of Mark Beagan?
Oh, nice. Yeah. So I came out of that kind of, and again, a little bit judgmental frame, but, out of the ashes twice, so to speak, and then coming out with that kind of North Star and those set of values. And then in the last 2 or 3 years, there was some deep epiphanies for me. And and they really came from, I went to this program in Boston. It was about a 6-month program at the Gestalt International Study Center in Cape Cod. I signed up because I wanted to go biking in Cape Cod and then learn on the side. And then another wave of COVID came, and I spent the entire course staring at this screen. Oh. But there was, I guess, 2 things that I really learned from that. And like, this was life-changing for me. One was, and the first one's really about awareness, and it's, we change when we become ourselves. And meaning, back when I was a vice president, if you said to me, even though everything was going south, I'm going to just mobilize all my energy and double down on being the greatest vice president of all time, that wasn't who I was or who I wanted to be. I climbed the ladder. I got to where I always thought was going to be the pinnacle of success and realized it was hollow. Mm-hmm. And so what I realized is who I am are all those things within the North Star and those values and stuff. And so it was really easy to mobilize energy and do it. I don't wake up in the morning and say, like, when I was at the steps of Congress, obviously that wasn't the right thing to say. But it was very easy just to check in with myself and go, wait a minute, that's not who I am. So
awareness becomes the space of reflection for your behavior or a feeling or a language, a statement. Yeah. When you talk a little bit about that program so people understand what the foundation of that program is intended, because it was a
coaching program, and it was founded on, people change when they feel it in their gut too. That's the other thing. So it's about seeking who we are. And then the second key epiphany out of there was something called the cycle of experience. Now, various psychological schools call it different things. But basically what the cycle of experience is that we'll change when we have something that's visceral and not feeling right. So it starts with our emotions. And then once and to your point, what you had said, once we seek to understand what our emotions are saying to us, we don't control them. They're those snap decisions, right? Or snap things that happen in the back of our brain. But we can seek to understand those emotions and then process those and then mobilize energy and take action. And it's interesting, as someone with a degree in psychology, I understood that. But then taking that into my coaching practice was just life-changing because, and I'll be a little vulnerable here, before then, I had a consultant's mindset. You have a broken WYSIWYG. I've fixed 5 of them. Do ABC and your WYSIWYG will get fixed. And maybe 20% would fix their WYSIWYG or whatever it was, right? And because it wasn't visceral, it really wasn't bothering them. It wasn't what they were, it wasn't their experience or their priority in life. Their life by design is different, right? Yeah. And so when I started to really just lean into curiosity and really help people to understand who they are and process those emotions and thoughts, and once they've done so, then we can get into, okay, let's experiment with A or B or C or D or E, right?
And how does that feel? I mean, ultimately, you're right. It's because no one, I don't know about you, but I think I'm still figuring out who I am. And I did this coach training recently, the Hogan Assessment, and I had done it in 2007. And I did it again in 2024. And in 2007, I was at Allscripts. I had left Thermo, and I was down here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And there was massive change. Now, the Hogan is pretty damn consistent. But there was some massive, not all of it, but just a handful of massive changes. And I said in the debrief, I said, you know why? Because my mindset was based on the way in which I thought I was supposed to be, not the way I've then uncovered that I naturally am. So my natural way of being is much more introverted, much less controlling. It's my natural way. I know y'all don't believe me, but and the differences were clear. And I'm more interested in feeling good and aesthetically surrounding myself with nice things that please me. And I don't even know if we know who we are when we come in onto this earth, or if we're just so quickly brainwashed and told to act in a certain way. I often say that maybe now is just the remembering. We are remembering our wholeness, remembering who we naturally are. How did you come to understand who you really are? And are you still in it like me?
Yeah, we're all figuring that out. It's funny. You reminded me, you made me think about something. After that EAP company, I worked in a financial service company that, I'll just say this, would get sued a lot.
Yeah.
And so I spent 2 years settling lawsuits. And that's, for those who know me, that's just not my thing. I can do it. Trust me, I can do it, but it's not my thing. Like, I would just show up with my checkbook and say, okay, yeah, you were wronged. How many zeros am I going to write here on the check, right?
Right.
And I remember people who I knew, though, we'd be at a party and they'd come up to me and say, Mark works at this financial institution. Like, let's stand up straight in front of him and all that. And all I could think of is, and it's a great example of those experiments where I do this little thing, let's try an experiment kind of thing, where I'm going to have a lot of status working for this financial service company and all that. And then you get there and you realize it isn't who you are,
Yeah.
And so I think that, yeah.
One of the main reasons I quit, with all due respect to that previous company, one of the reasons I quit is because there was an inconsistency. There was such a big gap between what my aligned values were and how I wanted to behave and show up as a leader from what many of the other leaders were doing, that it not that it was right or wrong. It just wasn't my way. It just wasn't my authentic way. And I remember watching the news during that time. This was when Lehman Brothers collapsed. I mean, everything, we were about to do the deal. We were dialing for dollars. And I remember thinking, because at first, like, Bank of America was having trouble, all sorts of, this was the big collapse. This was 2009. And I remember thinking 2008, 2009, I thought, where's HR? I'm watching the news thinking, where's human resources? And then I thought, holy shit, I'm human resources. And how am I focusing appropriately in this dynamic in our company? And where am I? Am I showing up? Am I capable? What am I really doing? And honestly, I'm not sure I was prepared. I know I needed to leave. I know it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. So did you ultimately leave that dynamic because you felt that it wasn't who you were?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, that's it. So, you have these values, even if they're not well aligned, when you're, quote, incongruent with the culture, right? And the culture was very risk and regulatory. I talked to somebody who thrived in the financial services sector, and she said to me, yeah, it's very risk averse and it's very highly regulated. So their strategy is very focused on risk and regulatory compliance, not on many of those things that, you and I have worked on that bring out a thing. And that was helpful because that culture wasn't bad. It just wasn't the culture. It wasn't the culture for me. Yeah.
That's kind of what this Hogan was showing us too, is how do you fit people into a culture appropriately? And, even Jack Welch used to say it when I worked at GE. He would say, look, you may not be an A player here. That's okay. Go be an A player somewhere else. If this is not the game you want to play, then pack up your bag and let's move it along. I mean, I think a lot of people, and those of you listening, if you've been complaining, let me just ask a question to the audience. Do you tend to complain and talk about your boss, the company, their behaviors in a manner that is judgmental and resentful? Do you talk about this at the cocktail party? Do you talk about this at the end of the day with your partner? Are you frustrated? Are you overwhelmed? And do you just wish they'd show up for you and do things just a little bit differently so that you could feel better? You're probably in the wrong place. Because unless you're going to keep going up through the ranks and become the leader that's going to make change towards that way of being, then get the hell out. Otherwise, embrace and accept what is, and then try to influence it. Take responsibility to make the changes. Otherwise, you're just being taught what you don't want, what you don't like, either culturally or when you do become a leader somewhere else, you'll know not to behave in that way. And there's value in all. That's my philosophy.
No, and it's interesting because I'll just use my little analogy about out of the ashes. The two major times in my life where I felt like I was in the ashes, I actually came out far stronger and more authentic to myself. And I've thrown judgment, ideally, except for when I met the foot of, by the way, it's a beautiful building. I just want to let you know all that.
You feel so bad. You're so funny.
Yeah, I've seen those, F-35s. They're beautiful pieces of engineering. Don't strike me down. But out of that, now I think to myself, let's try this. Let's do an experiment. And if it works, it's great. And if it's not, maybe it's not my cup of tea. And, when I'm coaching my clients, I'll say, hey, do you want to try something for, fun? Sometimes my clients say, sure. And they actually, their eyes light up because they really do want to try it. And they have this perception that they really want to do this. And then they come back 2 weeks later and say, yeah, that's not me,
Yeah, it wasn't right. That didn't align.
And there's a little bit of shame there because it's like, oh, we failed. I was supposed to try this experiment and all that. And then I just say, hey, it was an experiment. And you learned you don't like doing ABC, Right. Yeah. It's a good thing.
I love that you use that word experiment. And I love that you said fun at least 3 or 4 times already. So clearly I embedded this concept. I take full credit for your fun factor.
And I want to let you know, with my kids, we were mountain biking and roasting marshmallows and we were paddling.
I love it. I saw the pictures on Instagram. You guys had a blast.
Oh, yeah.
We could talk all day, as I say to every guest. I think, for me and for you, we've played a game, and the game served us very well in many ways. I don't have any regrets about those jobs. Or the companies. It was what you did. Not everybody went and did those things, but we did. We went and did the big corporate thing. But I'm so proud of both of us for our ability to change. And I'd love to hear your advice or insights about change. And I know you are, a certified change practitioner. Change is people's biggest fear, right? Change. Oh my God, I want to control it. I want to know what's going to happen. Like my biggest practice right now is not knowing. Just not knowing. I'm going through a divorce. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where that next project's going to come from. Being an entrepreneur in and of itself for 15 years, I don't know. And not knowing and not trying to go find out and figure it out has been a practice. It's my experiment right now. I'm having fun. Like I'll get ready to call and check on a contract that's pending. And I'll think, no, wait. Do I need to call them? Can I be patient? Can I wait instead of check in? So for me, that's how I am managing change and learning how to allow and accept and relax. Talk about change for you and any advice.
Yeah. And I'll do a build on the, kind of my North Star and where my priorities lie and those values. And when I do a check-in, here's my last thing. And it's interesting because I was introduced to this concept by the CEO of North America, who is ex-McKinsey. And then I found out it was actually a clinical psychological term. At least that's my understanding. is you can have a virtuous path, meaning there's, in my case, love, acceptance, kindness, and peace. And ideally, the people around me then exhibit and receive that love and kindness, and it builds this beautiful, virtuous path of love, peace, and acceptance, right?
Yes.
And the opposite of that is the vicious cycle. I show up, I'm negative, I'm frustrated, it projects that, and then the people around me see that, and it just spirals down. And so I think my number one thing for now is, even when I'm not at the steps of Congress in the US, I check in. Am I still working towards my true north? Am I living my values? And am I on a virtuous path? And if I'm not, let's course correct right away, because life's too short to live that vicious cycle. And I see people who've gone down that slippy slide, and it's not a good thing.
Well, you're talking about energy. And at the end of the day, like energy attracts like energy. So I love this analogy. You can choose this virtuous path or the vicious path. That's a really great reminder. That's an easy thing to remember. And you have to ask yourself, though, I think that's the key, right? For any change is, am I aligned to what matters most to me? And is this choice, honestly, is it going to make me feel good or feel bad? And if it makes me feel good, how sustainable is that? Is it a long-term? Is it persistent, right? Is it pervasive in my life? Or do I actually feel drained and regretful or filled with shame afterwards in any way, shape, or form? And that takes practice. You just keep asking yourself. I mean, it sounds like that. How did you get to that practice today? Was it the training that really taught you how to create space for self-observation?
Yeah, it was. And there were two professors in Boston, Jamie and Stuart. And I learned to coach, but I feel like, and I can give that to my clients, but I learned so much about myself along the way too. And Stuart in particular is a bit of a, in a kind, loving way, a bit of a, shines, maybe I won't point the finger, but put the mirror up and say, hey, have you realized how you're showing up today? And it's a little hard to hear that message, but it's a good one, right?
It is. And every coach, so this is important for people, don't hire a coach that has not gone through coach training, because majority of coach training, the really good programs, I guess I should say, really go deep. The first 6 months, or at least, 3 months, you're reflecting on who you are. And that work is critical. And don't hire a coach that doesn't have a coach, because it's ever changing. We are evolving constantly. And I love that you're an example of it. I'm an example of it. We can't do the work and help hold safe space for others if we haven't done that work for ourselves, really. It doesn't mean we're not still learning, and we don't know it all, but I'm glad that you shared that. I really do.
I always can't wait till I go into the ashes again, because the next chapter after that is always exciting. So,
oh my God, I'm glad you said that, because, I feel like I'm in the worst ashes of my life with this decision to I feel like I pulled the pin on a grenade and threw it into what appeared to be the perfect life, because it wasn't what I wanted. And, it wasn't what we both hoped it would be. And I'm really proud of myself, and it is the most terrifying thing to do. But again, when you are in the ashes, when you are in the flames, trust that it is better on the other side. You are going to be the phoenix that comes out of that. I know, or I would not have put myself in such risk and such uncertainty and fear. Talk to me about what you love most about your Life by Design now.
I believe in myself. It sounds really, that took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
I believe in myself. What I'm doing in this hopefully virtuous path that I'm on is bearing fruit. And I started my own company. And it's a slow journey to getting there. And we're well on our way.
Oh,
and
I believe in you too.
Thank you. And I wake up every morning, and it's funny, I had a great client this morning, and in 3 sessions, she's already night and day different than where she was. And so, and that comes from the fact that I do believe in myself. And it's not a false statement by any means. Some days I have to say that to myself, don't get me wrong. But I do it, going through those emotions, putting some thought, and then mobilizing energy and doing stuff all starts with, I believe in myself. So I say that all the time.
I love that. And it is about that self-love and recognizing that you're worthy of whatever success or dream or, life by design that your deepest heart desires. You're worthy of it. And I believe in you. And, I did an espresso shot about that. My father used to say, don't forget, Nicoa, you haven't applied the Nicoa factor yet. Because you are unique. Mark, you are unique. I'm unique. Every single person listening has a unique offering. And that's all you have to hang your hat on is you. And we're all here to help you, whether it's through coaching or just as, our voices on this podcast for everybody today. Oh, I'm so excited that we've had this conversation. It's so beautiful. Tell everybody how they can contact you. Of course, as I always say, I'll put stuff in the show notes, but I don't believe everybody reads the show notes. So tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, mark at markbeagan.com and www.markbeagan.com, and happy to connect. And if I can provide some help or assistance, coaching, consulting, organizational change, happy to help out.
And I know you would be a great help. And you and I have such a nice, long friendship. I'm so really, really pleased that we've reconnected. And hey, I don't know about you, but I had fun. Did you have fun?
This was great. I was a little nervous going in, and you made it nice and easy. It was lovely. And I even I told you my story about, being at the steps of Congress. So there we go.
That was great.
Yeah.
I have global listeners too, so it's not just Americans that are going to be judging you, Mark.
Yes. Okay. Sounds good.
Well, we thank you. We thank you. You're amazing. And I know that we'll reconnect. I'd love to touch base with you a year from now. Let's see how the business is going and see if you've gone through the ashes again. And I know I can't wait for a year from now. I know I will be out of these ashes and then everything will be on the upswing again for the next phase of our life by design. So will you have a date with me a year from today?
Absolutely.
All right. Put it on your calendar, man. Thanks for joining me on Coffee with Nicoa.
Thanks, Nicoa.
Thanks for joining us for a caffeinated conversation. Subscribe to Coffee with Nicoa for more stories from people living a life by design. You can also find inspiration on Instagram. Just follow Coffee with Nicoa. And check out our website, coffeewithnicoa.com. And that's Nicoa, Nicoa. We look forward to talking with you soon, and enjoy your coffee between now and then.